Good morning, Harlan.
Good morning, Harlan.
Morning.
Welcome everyone, and we'll start with our bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Hey,
And here is the passage that we are reading at this point. This is where we left off last year, and I believe actually this is the third year we're looking at this now. We may have started with this one. So we were talking now about selling property, and the Torah had started this particular portion discussing the sabbatical years and how in the seventh year the land was to lay fallow, no planting, no harvesting, etc. And basically that it went ownerless in that seventh year. And then, of course, it also talked about the Jubilee year, which followed 7 sets of 7 years. And then the 50th year, land would go back to its original owners. And so the implication is that you don't, if you sold land, because this is what we're dealing with right now, is that you would sell actually the harvests. And the Torah then goes into the idea of unfair charging. I believe they may be speaking about today as well. So there was actually a law that probably prevented inflation on some kind of level, that it wasn't just a market issue. It was also, there were simply laws that made it what was considered, or defined what was considered a fair markup. So the verse itself, b'mispar shanim achar hayovel, in the number of years following the Jubilee year, tikneh me'et amitecha, you shall purchase from your fellow. B'mispar shnei tfuot yimkor lach. What we're really talking about are the number of years of harvest he shall sell you. In other words, when he sells you the land, he isn't really selling you real estate. He is selling you the use of the land and how many harvests you're going to get out of it. So here's the Rashi. V'mispar shanim achar hayovel tikneh. According to the number of years following the Jubilee year, you shall purchase. Zeh hu pshuto, he says, this is going to be, what he's going to explain is the basic meaning, liyashev hamikra al ofanav, to settle or to explain this scriptural text according to its plain sense. Al ona'ah, regarding ona'ah. And ona'ah in one sense means wrongdoing, but here in this context, it has specifically the meaning of overreaching, overcharging. Baal has here, okay, it comes to give us a warning, right? To define it. Sheketimkor or tikneh karka, that when you sell or you purchase land, real estate, da kama shanim yesh ad hayovel. You need to calculate, you need to know and ascertain how many years there are left until the Jubilee year. Ulefi hashanim, and according to the number of years, utfuot hasadeh, and the harvests that the field, shehi re'uya la'asot, that the field is designated or fit to perform. In other words, according to the number of harvests you're going to get out of the field, yimkor hamocher, the one who sells the field, v'yikneh hakoheneh, and the one who purchases the field have to do that. They have to agree there are so many harvests to go, and you get charged per harvest, and that's how you pay for the field. Sharei sofo l'hachzira lo, because in the end, the field will return to its original owner, bishnat hayovel, in the Jubilee year. Ve'im yesh shanim mu'atot, and so if there are just a few years to go before the Jubilee year, V'zeh mochra b'damim yikarim, and the person sells it for a lot of money, very, very dearly. Hare nit'aneh lokeach. You can consider the purchaser to have been wronged, to have been charged an unfair price. V'im yesh shanim merubot, but if there are lots of years to go, 49 years or in that kind of number, right? It's a pretty large number of years. V'achal mimena tvuot harbe, so that he will be able to consume from this field many harvests. Hare nit'aneh mocher. You could say that if he doesn't sell it, again, doesn't charge enough, or the buyer, the purchaser, doesn't agree to pay a fair price, the seller, the mocher, the seller, has been wronged. Lefichach, and for this reason, tzarich liknota, one has to ascertain the purchase of it, lefi hazman, according to the time. Vezehu shenemar, and this is exactly what is being referred to, b'mispar shnei tfuot, according to the number of years of harvest, yimaker lacha, yimkor lach, it should be sold to you. Lefi minyan shnei hatfuot, according to the number of the years of harvest, shetehe omedet beyad halokech, that in which the field is going to be under the control of the purchaser, timkor lo, so accordingly you shall sell him. Rabbanan darshu, and our scholars, our sages, also interpreted, and this is in the Tractate Arachin, Mikan, from this verse we learn, Shahamocher Sadehu, that one who sells his field, a nor rashai, is not permitted to redeem the field, to buy it back, pachot mishtei shanim, any less than 2 years. So when you sell a field, and even though you're not selling it outright, you have to sell it for at least 2 years. 2 years. Sheta'amod shnei shanim b'yad halokech, that it should remain under the control of the purchaser, miyom leyom, from literally it says from one day to the next, but I believe here it can mean, in other words, consecutively. And in this particular case, there may in fact be 3 harvests, during those 2 years. So in other words, it told you to sell it to him according to the number of years and also according to the number of harvests. But since it's a minimum of 2 years, it's potentially can produce 3 harvests, and Rashi explains how. Kagon shemachra lo bekamoteha. For example, if he sold the field to the purchaser while the grain was still standing. In other words, he sold it at the time of year when you had actually standing grain ready to harvest. So you'd have that harvest, you'd have the harvest of the year following, and then you'd have the harvest of the year following that, because it's ready to be harvested, and he's going to have this 2 years later. It's also going to be ready to be harvested, and he can harvest it. The ushne, and about the word ushne, this word and shnei, which of course can sound like it means 2, because shnaim is a word that means 2 in Hebrew. It can also mean the word year. Eino yotze mipshuto. He says the word shnei in this verse does not shnei. Here we go, right? So the years is saying what he means. It does not, we don't give it a different interpretation. Klomar mispar shanim shel tfuot. We understand this shnei according to not 2 harvests, but according to the number of years, okay, or of harvests. velo shel shidafon, and it doesn't mean years of flooding, umiut shnayim, and the least number of two is shnayim. There we go, the shnayim. So a minimum of 2 years, and it means years of harvest. So give me one moment. I need to just adjust a little bit. Okay, thank you. And we'll go, I believe that is the verse, and on the Rashis, let's just double check. Yeah, all right. So we're going to go back and go to the next verse. So we were there. So this has to do with fair dealing, right? That it's not just a free market in the sense that you can charge whatever you like and whatever you can get away with, but that there are certain standards of what is considered a fair way to deal. The Torah goes on saying, "Lefi rov hashanim," according to the large number of years, tarbe miknato. In other words, if it has many years to go until the Jubilee, and by the way, of course, it may sound redundant, but I believe that it just, at least on the very simplest level, it can mean this is such an important law, and obviously people are so tempted to break it that the Torah wants to emphasize it. So according to a large number of years, you shall miknato, its sale price shall be large. Ulefi ma'ot hashanim, and according to a small number of years, tam'it miknato, you should make its purchase small. Ki mispar tfuot hu mocher lach, because he is, and it just emphasizes the idea that according to the number of harvests, he is selling it to you. Tarbe miknato, Rashi, timkarena beyoker. So very straightforward, he's saying what it means is you can sell it for a large price. Tam'it miknato, you shall make it, but tam'it bedameha, you shall minimize its price. And then it goes on to this whole idea of ona'ah. V'lo tono ish et amito, and a man should not wrong his fellow. So of course, it's just been talking about it. So what could it be talking about here? V'yareta me'elohecha, and you shall fear your God, ki ani adoshem elokechem, for I, the Lord, am your God. So we'll see exactly what we're talking about here. V'lo tunu ish amito, and a person should not wrong their fellow. What are we talking about? So this is in the Sifra. Kan, he's here, al ona'at dvarim. Here, the Torah is giving warning regarding wronging through words. Shelo yaknit ish et chaveiro, that a person should not vex, make angry his fellow. Velo yasienu eitza, nor should he give him advice, she'ena hogenet bo, which does not fit his situation. In other words, to give person intentionally bad advice. Lefi darko, according to that person's needs. So we know when it's a matter of giving advice, not everyone needs the same advice. People's situations are unique, and not taking into account that person's situation, unique situation, and giving them advice may in fact be tantamount to giving them bad advice. V'hana'ato shel yo'etz, and the wrongdoing of the one who gives advice. So this is what we're talking about here. This is what the Torah is warning us about. V'im tomar mi yodea, and if you should say, who's going to know, im nitkavanti l'ra'ah, that I intended it for wickedness, for evil. L'chach ne'emar, and for this reason it states, v'yareta me'elokecha, you shall fear your God. And I want to emphasize that relatively recently, I understand that when it says fear your God, it is referring to being obedient. That's what it's talking about. So essentially, to be God-fearing simply means to be obedient to divine law. So again, this also tells us that the notion of being disobedient to divine law is nothing new. It is not an aspect of modernity. It's always been out there. Okay, so who? No one's going to. Sorry, I went too far. And for this reason, it says, "You shall fear your Lord, your God." Hayodea machshavot, because God knows thoughts. God is aware of all our thoughts. Hu Yodea, right? All Hu Yodea. He knows all thoughts. Kol davar hamasur lalev, anything that is designated to one's heart. In other words, anything that isn't open, but is in one's private recesses of your heart. She'ein makir ela mi shehamachshava balibo. So in other words, only the person who is actually thinking this recognizes what's really going on. Regarding that, the Torah states, "Vayareta melokecha," you should fear your God. And I'm going to stop here today, and I'm going to pop in the place, and we'll, God willing, pick this up tomorrow. And let's see where we are. Here we are. Well, excuse me, I'm going to do one more verse. Forgive me. We'll start there tomorrow. Here we go. I'm going to do verse 18. Va'asitim et chukotai, and you shall perform my statutes. And of course, we know that chukim, my statutes, refer to laws that don't necessarily have a rational basis to them. And please be careful if you're not muted. Check and make sure you're muted. I'm hearing a bit of sounds from outside. So these are things like Shabbos and Kashrut, those kinds of laws. The law that we've just been talking about wrongdoing, etc., behaving in that way, obviously, it makes sense that that's the way you set up a stable society. So you shall practice my chukim, my statutes, ve'it mishpatai tishmeru, and you shall guard my laws, v'asitem otam, and you shall perform them, v'yishavtem ala aretz lavetach, so that you may remain on the land securely, lavetach, securely. And that's where we'll stop the share, and I will stop the recording.